Hi, guys. Welcome back to season 2, episode number 2 of the Let It Go, Flow, and Grow podcast. Thanks for coming back. What a week it has been with Halloween. So happy Halloween. There was also a Scorpio new moon that has brought up a lot of old trauma and baggage. So if you feel like you've been going through it, this past like week to 2 weeks, you are not alone. There's a lot going on in the air right now. And I know that personally, it brought up a bunch of stuff that I needed to work through before I went through the new moon into kind of this new season of life, right? Because with the new moon, basically you're trying to let go of all that baggage so that you can move forward renewed. And I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works. So, anyways, there were a few things that I did want to address. Basically, with the last episode, if you tuned in, then you would know that I was going over the different laws of the universe and the law of attraction. And I made sure to post this on Facebook. I made sure to post this on all the different socials. However, for some reason, it was not allowing me to edit the description of the last episode. So I'm just going to put it here. Whenever you are manifesting, there are a couple extra things that you can do that I did not bring up last week. And the first thing is that you really should look into making a vision board. And a really fun way of being able to do that is by making a phone background, maybe off of Pinterest, off of wherever you want it to be. My best friend ended up telling me about this, basically just making a collage of all the different things that you are trying to manifest into your life, putting it as your phone background. So that way you are looking at it all the time. Cause I know that a lot of us are on our phones most of the time. So that's a really fun hack technique that you can do whenever you're trying to manifest things. Something else that I wanted to mention last week is the phrase, I am a creator or a co creator in my reality. And therefore, I allow whatever it is that you want to be created into your reality. And that comes from the Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks book. About manifesting, which is something that I mentioned last week. So basically you say like, I want this in my reality, and I know that I am a creator or co-creator into my reality, and therefore I allow blank to be created into my reality. um Still make sure that you're visualizing, still make sure that you're trying to be as specific as possible without worrying about the how of everything that's going to like come up, like how it's going to happen. But using that phrase can be extremely helpful and beneficial, and just kind of getting into the habit of realizing, oh yeah, I am co-creating with the universe, I am co-creating with source and creator. So yeah, realizing that. And there were a couple other books that I wanted to recommend. One is Feeling is the Secret, which I believe is by Neville Goddard. I want to say I had it written down, but I forgot to write it down here. And the other one is The Secret, and I believe that's written by Rhonda Byrne, Byrne. Both of those are really great books for manifesting. I've been listening to The Secret recently, and it's been really beneficial. And there's also a movie that's based off of it, so I recommend it for sure. And again, that just taps into like reprogramming the way that your mind works, which taps into the last season whenever I went over that in one of the previous episodes. And the last thing, or last two things, one is that you should be moving in silence. Whenever you are trying to manifest something, stop telling people about what you're trying to manifest. And I know that I can be really bad about this as well. Sometimes you can use it as a superpower. Like, basically, whenever you're trying to manifest something, if you get more than one person to believe that it is true, then sometimes it'll help like expedite it. But I would always recommend just moving in silence, because you never know what people's true intentions are. And sometimes they might even send you energy without even realizing that they're sending you energy. So I always recommend moving in silence. That's something that God has been really urging me to do lately, is stop talking about my plans. Which is kind of hard because people keep trying to ask me about my plans. And I know they're just trying to like make conversation and like, be like, oh yeah, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. So I've just been very like, it's okay to be discreet about your life. Privacy is a huge thing. Not everybody needs to know everything about your life. Doesn't matter if they're a family member, doesn't matter if they're your partner, doesn't matter if they're your friends, whatever it may be. It's okay to move in silence. It's okay to go and talk to Creator and God about what you want to bring into your reality. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is, so with this episode, it's all going to be about PTSD and CPTSD. So it's going to be all about, trauma and dealing with those kinds of things. And so I wanted to remind you that if you ever want to reach out and say hi, feel free to comment on the videos, or the episodes, and feel free to DM me on any of the socials, or you can always email me at the lgfgpodcast at gmail.com. Because I'm here for you. So if you are like, hey, this really made me think of this, I would love to discuss it further. Or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But yeah, let's move into using your trauma as ammo for fuel for your healing. All right. Okay, so I do have a fun fact for you, as I always do. And today, my fun fact is all going to be about schizophrenia and the brain. Did you know that people who suffer from schizophrenia have different brain structures than neurotypical people? Everyone's brain has something called gray matter, and this gray matter helps us to keep our nerve cells safe that are in charge of moving our muscles, our ability to use our senses, and more. And after doing a lot of brain images, they actually found that those who suffer with schizophrenia have less gray matter around their temporal and frontal lobes. So, if you don't know what the temporal lobe is in charge of, it's in charge of your memory, your ability to comprehend words, how you process emotions, your senses, and your ability to recognize faces, things, and more. Whereas your frontal lobe is in charge of using logic, judgment, making sound decisions, or being creative. It's also in charge of your ability to understand social norms, your executive functioning, such as organization, your attention span, your self control, memory, and more. And the frontal lobe is also in charge of your voluntary usage of muscles and your ability to learn and recall info. Now, sadly, as time goes on, gray matter loss continues as you age. So the more that you lose, the worse the symptoms can get. So the fact that those with schizophrenia already have less gray matter means that their symptoms might get worse with time. Um, and they also found that white matter around the brain seems to be damaged or altered, usually as well. And white matter contains nerve fibers and nerve cells, which are important, basically to communicate with the rest of your body. So being able to like move your arm, being able to smell or hear or whatever it is. And lastly, it was noted that those who suffer from schizophrenia usually are more sensitive to the effects of dopamine. So this is the feel good neurotransmitter. So if you've ever like gotten high, or if you've ever like felt really good, it's probably because your brain is releasing a lot of dopamine. It's feeling the effects of dopamine. But those with schizophrenia usually are more sensitive to dopamine. So this causes them to have hallucinations and delusions. And there's another neurotransmitter that actually is noted to be very high with schizophrenia, which is glutamate. And glutamate helps with perception and thinking, as well as memory and learning. So those with schizophrenia are noted to have too much of glutamate, and they are too sensitive to dopamine. Because, if you have too much of anything, it can really cause problems. So those with schizophrenia are noted as having more difficulties in things like memory and learning. They're usually, that's why they have those hallucinations and things along those lines. And I really wonder if psychedelics can like help undo and regrow the brain, since psilocybin is known to be able to help with like neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is basically, and I've explained this in a different episode, but basically it's the fact that whenever you're a child and you're learning a new language, usually you're able to learn that new language a lot easier because you have more neuroplasticity, because basically all the train tracks, your neural pathways in your brain haven't been used yet, and they haven't been able to be like assigned for certain things yet. And psilocybin helps you to regrow those neural pathways, by helping with that neuroplasticity and be able to like rewire those neural pathways and just make it easier. But um, you just learned some neuroscience. So congratulations. Look at you. If you were able to keep up with me about that. I love learning about the brain. But yeah, if you ever want to understand why people who suffer from schizophrenia might act a little bit differently, it's because they have less gray matter. It's because their white matter has been altered with in some form or fashion. And it's also because the two neurotransmitters that are for feeling good and for memory and learning might be a little bit messed up. So, fun fact. Okay, so let's move on to the the meat and potatoes of the episode. And first things first, I wanted to apologize if my voice is very raspy. I choked on some water this morning, and yeah, it makes my voice sound a little bit different. So, anyways, second thing is, I wanted to say that today I'm going to be going over PTSD and CPTSD and kind of going over the differences of those. This is going to be a little bit heavier of an episode, and I'm not necessarily saying that I'm going to be um, kind of like going into the like traumatic events that I've been through necessarily. I might say a couple anecdotes here and there, but the main thing that I wanted to look into is just kind of like the differences between the two, and kind of explaining that, and then also basically helping you to be able to use that trauma that you have been through as ammo for healing, so that way you can become more powerful and grow. And if I am talking quickly, I apologize for that. I can talk about psychology pretty much all day, every day, because I don't know if I've explained this, but I do have 2 degrees in psychology. So I love psychology. I'm very passionate about it. But I'm going to try not to bogart too much. Okay. So, first things first. I wanted to say that everyone has gone through something and everyone has a story, just like you have. And I'm not necessarily saying that like your story doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. Actually, I'm saying quite the opposite. Um, but what I'm saying is to be kind to everyone, because you never know what somebody is going through, and just kind of putting out the energy that you want back in your life. Right. And that's kind of what I was going over the last episode. Oh my God, I'm like moving my camera around. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get comfortable. But yeah, everybody's gone through something. So just understand that. And just be kind to people whenever you meet them. Why not? And if you're kind to somebody and they're negative back to you, I know this is a lot easier said than done. But I'd always recommend just praying for that person, or you can say what my great grandma used to say, which is, may all my bad luck go with them. May all my bad luck go with them. Which I think is kind of like a way of saying like return to sender, but I don't necessarily think so. So anyways, so yeah, so everyone has been through something. And I think that there's like this big divide in our society of people who either use it as like their pain as a crutch to be unkind to other people, or there are people who are like, I went through that, so I don't ever want you to go through that. And then there's some of us then there's like the other part of society that are like, I went through this, so you have to go through it too. And so I think there's a big divide of like whether or not you're going to use the trauma and pain that you have been through as an excuse to be unkind to people, or whether or not you're going to use it as ammo for healing and being kind to yourself and others. And on the flip side of that, I know that it's not fun to go through things, and I also know that I've gone through the dark night of the soul personally. And if you don't know what the dark night of the soul is, I recommend looking into it. It's basically just like a period after a spiritual awakening where you kind of have to go through it. After you wake up, just kind of like going through it and kind of just like tearing apart everything that you used to know and healing from everything and clearing out that karmic debt. And there's going to be like resistance. I mean, at least with me and most people, is that, after I went through my spiritual awakening, I ended up being really excited about it and then getting really scared and running away, because I was like, okay, now I have to deal with everything that I've been running from for a really long time. And that is what the dark night of the soul is going through everything and either fighting the universe or whether or not or not fighting it anymore. And whenever you're fighting it, you're in that dark night of the soul where it feels like basically the universe is dragging you by your teeth until you are ready to cooperate. And I think a lot of people go through it. I think a lot of people are going through it right now. um, I think there's a lot of us that already went through it years ago, and now we have, woken up and realized that, the universe is not against us. The universe is trying to work with us, and kind of moving out of that victim mindset. And, that's the whole reason why I'm here, right? Sadly, whenever I was going through that dark night of the soul, I ended up, well, I wasn't sad. Let me explain. I had a very good friend for a very long time who told me that it's okay to be in pain, but it is not okay to push your pain onto other people. And sadly, what ended up happening was I ended up pushing a lot of my pain onto her. And, I still regret it, but it's also the fact that I'm learning to forgive myself because we have parted ways since then and I have grown a lot. And I have apologized to her. And I still send her all of the love and healing. I mean, there's no way that I could apologize for everything that we had been through because we had been friends for like 6 years. Um, and now I'm to a point where I have basically used all these experiences that I had with her and in life, to be able to heal. And I'm trying to be gracious with myself and I'm trying to be compassionate with myself because I looked back at the time that I was pushing that pain onto her and I realized that I was carrying a lot of pain that was extremely heavy. And I didn't want to deal with it. I did not want to deal with it. I wanted to drink and I wanted to party and I wanted to do drugs and I wanted to get with boys or girls or whatever it may be and not deal with my problems. And so I went through the dark night of the soul and I ended up hurting a lot of people in that process. But now that I'm out of that, now I am here and I am making this podcast so that I can try to help you navigate through your dark night of the soul. And whenever you're ready to learn and be able to actually move on from everything, I'm not like you, you as in a listener. That's who I'm talking to. Whenever you're able to like stop running from the pain, that's why I'm here because I'm going to be on the other side of that dark night of the soul whenever you stop running. Because a thing is that yes, your story matters, but I want to know who you are now. I don't want to know who you were 10 years ago. I don't want to know who you were, a few months ago. I don't care about who you were in the past. Every day is a day where you can wake up and be rebirthed. And I want you to know that your past does not define you. I don't care about who you were in the past as long as you are learning from the past to be a better person. Right. And I think that's a big thing about like grace and compassion. And I think that's basically exactly what Jesus was talking about of like, you have to leave your old life behind so that way you can move forward and live a new life. Because whenever we were in that dark night of the soul and we were dealing with that, we were dead, right? We were dead in spirit. We were not connected to spirit. And and a lot of us, I mean, a lot of society still is walking around like zombies. I was just journaling on this. But whenever we're in that dark night of the soul and we're running away from our problems and we're drinking and we're partying and we're doing drugs and whatever it may be and blah, 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 we are like zombies because we're walking around asleep. And that's what it means to be awake. And boom, bam, done. Okay, I need to move on from this. So, yes, as I was saying, you can use that pain from your past and use your story as an excuse to not be kind to people or use it as an excuse to stay stagnant or stay still, or you can use it as ammo for healing. And that is why I am here to go over this with you. I also don't believe that there are any coincidences. I believe that everything that you have faced and gone through can be used for good. And I used to say that whenever I was studying to be a therapist is like, how else would I be a good therapist if I hadn't gone through the same things that other people had gone through? Like, it's great to be like, oh, I'm so sorry that you went through that, but not actually understand and have the empathy for other people. And I'm still using that to this day. But yeah, just remember that as well. This is something that I wanted to say. Something that might be traumatic to you might not be traumatic to somebody else. And that's okay. And I'm going to repeat that. Something that might be traumatic to you might not be traumatic to somebody else. And the reason that I wanted to reiterate that is because you are valid in your emotions. You are valid in the way that that action or experience made you feel. It does not make you weaker and it does not make you less of a person for having something feel traumatizing to you that might not be traumatizing to another party. And I say that because with a lot of the older generation, they're always like, oh, well, back in my day, I had I had to walk uphill to school in the snow and uphill back home with a 20-pound backpack full of bricks on my back. And it's like, what you're going through isn't that big of a deal. And what I love is that this generation of parents right now seem to be moving away from that mentality. And I'm not talking about like iPad kids. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the generation right now that's really having kids of people who are like, I don't want my kids to go through the things that I went through as a child. Because just because you said it was okay and your parents told you that it was okay, that doesn't make it okay. So let's move on into the difference between CPTSD and PTSD. Okay, so PTSD, let's start there. Post traumatic stress disorder. I'm sure that you have heard of it. It is characterized by going through something that is traumatic and then it causing it to disrupt your daily activities months after the trauma has occurred. So you might have bad memories or flashbacks pop up. You might feel on edge. You might have trouble sleeping, or you might have avoidance of the space where the trauma occurred. If you went through something traumatic and you repress it, and there's a difference between repression and suppression, and I want to go over that real fast. With suppression, suppression, you are just kind of shoving your feelings down. That is you not letting yourself feel something fully. Whereas repression is whenever you basically take that memory and you shove it into a box and your own like conscious mind forgets about it. Okay. So if you went through something traumatic, you might repress it and it might not come up until a long period afterwards because a lot of people go into survival mode. And I know that because I did that for a very long time and I'm still learning to move out of that. So you might re experience the trauma in different ways whenever it does pop up, such as flashbacks, nightmares, or even see or hear something that causes your body to go back into that fight or flight response, which makes you feel like you are back in that space. And that's usually seen as someone getting triggered. And what I really hate is the idea that people are too sensitive because their body is going back into an adrenaline state over something that they have endured. I hate the whole idea that like, oh, are you getting triggered? Blah blah blah. The people who mock other people for getting triggered are the same people who have repressed and suppressed their own emotions. And I will leave that there for now. There's a whole rant that I could go on with that, but I'm going to leave that there. And that is why I am huge on mental health advocacy. And I think that a lot of like my generation and maybe like maybe a little bit of the generation above me as well as below me, we all agree that, well, I don't know, we all agree. I think a lot of us agree that it's not cool to just like not feel things. I don't know. I guess there's such a split. There's two different sides of it, right? Duality. Da da. Anyways, okay. So I also wanted to point out that the media's versions of flashbacks are not exactly accurate. Um, I was having flashbacks and I still get them sometimes, and it doesn't feel like it does in like a movie where it feels like everything melts away and I'm like in that exact same place. It's more like, personally for myself, it sounds like a broken record in my brain and it feels like I am regressing to my child self or that inner part of me that is holding on to that trauma that wants to show me that trauma. Because sometimes, your subconscious is not ready for you to see that trauma. And then there are times whenever it pops up and that inner part of you is like, okay, I'm finally ready to show you this. Okay. So, for example, a big trigger for me has been money for a very, very long time. And I would get flashbacks whenever I like wasn't making enough money or I was scared that like something bad was going to happen. I would get flashbacks to being told that I wasn't good enough. I needed to get my shit together. And why couldn't I be like everybody else of my age? And it was like I could hear that person that had told me those things for so long in the back of my mind screaming these things at me. And I would spiral extremely hard. And that, my friends, is what it is a great example of what a flashback is. Um, and that was it. I mean, the flashback was the broken record of my mind feeling like I was back in school, not being able to keep up with everybody else, even though I was in I'm in my adult body, working 2 to 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet. And I've also experienced more intense flashbacks, like I said earlier, where my inner family system, and I talked about that in the previous season. I don't remember what episode in particular, but yeah, like my inner child or my inner teen or whoever would come to the forefront with information that my subconscious had hidden to me from me. And this happened to me recently. I ended up regressing back into my inner preteen whenever I was feeling ignored and rejected by my peers, and I felt like I was at war internally. And luckily, I ended up being able to unravel that more in EMDR. And it was extremely helpful because I realized that I had been carrying around this baggage for such a long time. And I still have more work to do. But what I mean is that flashbacks come in all shapes and sizes. And I think that the media has really dramatized them. um because I mean yeah, it has, and you might be experiencing a flashback without even realizing that it's a flashback, and that's the main reason why I'm going over that. Okay, so the second thing that happens a lot with PTSD is avoidance of things that remind you of the event. So for example, I faced a lot of trauma in a school that I attended for a very long time. And because of that, the thought of walking back into that school causes me still to have horrible anxiety. And whenever I was going to go home and visit, I really wanted to, like, there were like two different parts of me that were really they're really at war, because there was one part of me, my inner teen, that was like, yeah, I want to walk back in there and I want to show everyone how far I've made it and how much I've grown. And then there was other parts of me that were like, I never want to go back in there. That was such a traumatizing time in my life that I can never step foot back in that school. And so I realized that for me, it's not productive for me to ever go back into that space. And therefore, I will not, because it would be more destructive than productive. And I find exposure therapy very, very interesting. um I don't think that that's something that could really benefit me. Maybe, desensitization is very interesting. um but I don't, I mean, yeah, so that, I think that's a good example of like avoidance of an area. The next symptom that I'm going to be going over is having more negative thoughts and emotions than before the event. So, a lot of people go numb right after the trauma or a long time after the trauma as a form of self preservation and staying in survival mode, which can cause that person to suppress, right, to shove down or repress their emotions, which is right, locking it in that vault. Um, repress their emotions and feelings to keep going. And something that is really frustrating is the narrative that the things that you have gone through need to be pushed past so that you can keep making money. And I am here to tell you that you are here for so much more. And I know I've said this at least 20 times. You are here for so much more than to work, eat, sleep, and die. I know. I know. Society is going to tell you something different. But I know I posted a video about this with Rainn Wilson, who was talking, where he said, you are a spiritual being getting to experience what it is like to be human, not a human with a soul. You are a soul having the human experience. And I think that he put it the perfect way, because sometimes personally I get upset with myself for being too sensitive or too emotional, and I apologize to like my spirit team, or I apologize to the divine, um for being too sensitive. And Jesus always says to me, he's like, why are you apologizing for being human? Like, that's literally the whole reason that you are here, is to feel. And he's right, and I think that so many of us here have these emotions, and yet so many of us get disconnected from them, and we see them as scary, whenever it's literally like the whole reason that we're here. And I saw a video, and I was trying to find it earlier. I'm hoping that I can find it later, but I don't even know like what I would write. I don't even know what I would write like in the search bar, or if it even exists. I might have to like go digging through some playlists. But it was talking about thinking about the ideal that you meeting with God before you came here, and God being like, I have an awesome opportunity for you. How would you like to go down into an experience where you get to experience all of the emotions, all the joy and the happiness, the anger, sadness, and fear, and all of it wrapped into one, and be able to feel and taste and smell things, like in the blink of an eye. Because time is an illusion, first things first. I say that all the time. But I think the way that she put it really, really put it back into perspective for me, because I think a lot of us forget that we chose to come here. And if you don't think that you chose to come here, you're wrong. I promise that you did. I recommend the book Journey of Souls. I believe by, I think his name is Michael Newton. Maybe I'm saying, yeah, Michael Newton. Really, really good book. It's talking about like, it's about this guy who was a hypnotherapist, a regressionist hypnotherapist, where he would go into past lives, and he ended up doing all of these like case studies, of all these different regression like therapies that he did for past lives, or just states of hypnosis, where he ended up finding out that most people had very similar experiences. And it's a really good book. I've read it a couple of times now, and I always recommend it. But it very much goes into the understanding that we chose to come here because we had things that we needed to learn as a soul. Okay. So, anyway, so back to the symptoms. So, you might feel immense shame or guilt, um, or you might feel like the world can't be trusted. You might repress some memories altogether, which means that you put them into a vault until your mind feels that you are able to handle them. And I, for a long time, was like, oh, I haven't done that. And then I was kind of like scared that I had done it. And I absolutely had done it, because one of the biggest vaults that I ended up unlocking last year, one of the biggest safes that I ended up unlocking last year, was what led me onto my journey to healing all the SA trauma that I have been through. Because I ended up unlocking the vault, because my mind was like, okay, you have done enough healing that you are now ready to deal with this, because there are going to be things that are going to be coming up in your reality that you need to be able to face. And the things that you have gone through, you now are going to be able to use to help other people. Okay. So, the last symptom of PTSD is feeling on edge or being extra alert. So, always feeling like you are in fight mode, or like your adrenaline is up. So, say that you end up getting in a car crash, or you end up getting mugged or something like that, or maybe your house gets broken into, you might be hyper aware, or you might be like, like always checking your blind spots or whatever it may be. Or maybe you, like, something that I did is, so I lived in like a not, a very not good part of town, um, for a while. And whenever I was married, it was years ago, and we lived in a very not good part of town, and I was terrified, with the massive amount of shootings that were going on every single night, that somebody was going to break into our apartment. Somebody did try to break into our apartment once, but yeah, anyways, I was always very hyper aware anytime that I was around there, but mostly at night. And this is still something that I do now, is I'll get really worried that the door isn't locked. Even though I live in a nice part of town now, I'm still worried that, like, oh no, like our door isn't locked. Like, and I have to check it like multiple times just to make sure. And I wonder if that's like OCD. But I think it's mostly from my trauma because of the things that I experienced of like just the fear that somebody was going to break in. And actually, I lived in a cottage for a while last year, about a year and a half ago, where somebody did try to break into our cottage or our home in the middle of the night. But it wasn't through our front door; it was actually through my window, which was a whole thing. And I'm not even going to go into that. I have a lot of lore I've realized, and it's like, anyways, yeah. So yeah, so you might be hyper aware. You might start doing or like being on edge or extra alert. And so you might not be able to sleep well. You might be like checking things often. And other things that can come up as well is like getting startled by a loud noise, such as like a door slamming or like glass breaking or whatever it is. And that is a big thing. It's that I notice, like personally, like if I hear a door slam, like that sometimes will really freak me out or like causes my body to kind of go into like fight mode. And it's also common for there to be substance abuse or to act out in unhealthy ways, such as like fighting or road rage. So, if any of these symptoms last longer than a month after the trauma, and it can be chronic, I think that's important as well. Like, it doesn't have to be like ongoing, it can also just be like randomly, like chronic, like it just pops up. So, remember that um, if these symptoms are popping up and they are disrupting your life, or if they are very upsetting, or if they are basically standing as blockades from you to be able to function, like on your day to day, then it might be something to look into. Um, and like I said before, something that might not be traumatizing to somebody else might be traumatizing to you. And it might be something that you need to work through. So I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I did a paper on the benefits of using MDMA in a therapeutic setting. If I haven't talked about it, I know that I want to. But yeah, so whenever I was in my last semester of my bachelor's, I ended up writing a lot of papers on using psychedelics in a psychological like therapeutic setting. And one of them that I looked into was MDMA, and I ended up watching one of these TED talks, and I can link it in the Facebook page if you would like me to. Um, but basically, it was talking about this participant who had been struggling with severe PTSD after leaving the military. And he was really angry. He was very disconnected from himself. And so he would drink. And whenever he would drink, he would get into bar fights. And there was nothing that he did that really felt like it could help him after the things that he had seen. I mean, the things that he had done and the things that he had been through. So finally, he went through and he signed up for this MDMA trial therapy. And it really helped him come to terms with everything that he had seen. And it helped him to process everything and find forgiveness for himself. And it always like makes my chest like rise a little bit because it's like, I don't know, it kind of makes me like tear up a little bit because I think that anyways, and now he does philanthropic work overseas and is a completely different person. And I think that's a huge reason why I'm such a huge proponent for psychedelic usage in therapy, because a big thing is that, and I'm gonna say this right now, I'm not the biggest fan of ketamine, but other psychedelics like let me explain. Ketamine is a dissociative. Okay, it's not a psychedelic, and the fact that it has been like passed off as a psychedelic kind of bothers me. I much prefer like MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, things along mescaline, things along those lines. Those are psychedelics to me. And so whenever I'm talking about this, I'm talking about using these psychedelics in a psychological therapeutic environment where you can trip and have somebody there who is ready to help you. But a big reason why I love psychedelics is because they really can be life changing and they can take down those emotional walls. So like I feel like every day we kind of go through life with these barricades around our minds, and it's very hard to be able to tap into like our emotions. And what psychedelics does is it takes down those walls, so that way it makes it a little bit easier for us to be able to really talk to ourselves and get to know ourselves. So the fact that he was able to find peace after being so angry for so long and dealing with everything that he had dealt with really just warms my heart. And I will try to find that TED talk and put it on the Facebook page, and so that way you can watch it if you are interested. So, and also, by the way, Psilocybin is now decriminalized in Colorado. It has been for a while, but I saw a news article the other day and I tried to track it down, but I couldn't. That was talking about basically it's on its way to being legalized, so that way therapeutic settings and clinics can use it for people for depression and things along those lines. So, anyways, to reiterate, PTSD looks different in everyone, especially varying in severity of it. But if you are suffering with any of these symptoms, I would recommend that you talk to someone, and I would highly recommend EMDR or some sort of CBT, which is cognitive behavioral talk therapy, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, that's talk therapy. And I say EMDR in particular because it's something that I'm a huge proponent for, because it has been something that has been life changing for me. I was in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for many, many years. And, it's great and everything, but it can only get to so much, because I think something that a lot of people struggle with, that I struggled with, is being so self aware, but not understanding why the things were happening. And I also wasn't doing like my work outside of the therapeutic settings. But yeah, so I say EMDR, because sometimes we hide things in our subconscious, and it's hard to bring it to the surface with CBT. And it says that other therapies that you can do as well are exposure therapy or cognitive processing therapy, which I haven't looked into cognitive processing therapy, but basically it's where you can learn skills to understand how the trauma has changed your thoughts and feelings, and changing how you think about trauma, and how trauma can change how you feel. So, right. So it's like basically understanding how trauma has changed your brain and then learning skills of how to combat that. Okay. So I'm going to next go into CPTSD. Okay, so now let's forward and discuss CPTSD, which is complex post traumatic therapy or complex. Oh my God, I can't speak. Complex post traumatic stress disorder. I almost said therapy disorder, which is a little bit different than PTSD. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they have it because it can start at such a young age, and it can come from long term trauma. So, examples of this long term trauma can include things, but are not limited to long term child abuse, long term domestic violence, being a victim of human trafficking, war, or frequent violence in your community, or more. And usually it's associated with children, which have endured it from a younger age, but it can also include adults. So this CPTSD can include symptoms such as, but are not limited to, anxiety, having flashbacks or nightmares, avoidance of anything involved with the trauma, including people, places, or things. And it can also include heightened emotions such as sensitivity, impulsiveness, and aggressiveness. And it usually pops up in relationships, as one might have difficulty sustaining relationships later on in their life. So there's actually a lot of discourse around whether or not CPTSD should be specified and differentiated from PTSD. But I personally think that it should be. And some also think that BPD, like borderline personality disorder, and CPTSD should be one and the same. They're not sure if they're the same or whether or not they're different. But for now, a lot of people can just kind of agree on the fact that any trauma, disorder, or disability is on a spectrum, right? So yes. So the main difference between people with CPTSD and PTSD is that people with C, I'm just going to say C, they will suffer from the same symptoms as PTSD, but they'll have extra on top of it. So they're going to have difficulty regulating their emotions. They're going to have difficulty with their sense of self because it's mostly going to be shrouded by emotions such as guilt or shame. And they're also, like I said, going to have issues in their relationships. And trauma, like I said with schizophrenia, trauma can really change the ways that our brain develops and our way and our like brain structure. So if you are dealing with long-term trauma growing up, before your brain is fully developed, it can really mess with that development of your brain. I've suffered with CPTSD or C. And I have known others who have also struggled with it, such as my ex husband. I mean, he went through severe physical and verbal abuse growing up, and it really impacted his ability to maintain healthy relationships. And it also destroyed like the way that he viewed himself. And it was really sad because it was so normalized in his family that like he was a man and like, he had to fight and like that, he needed to be strong and all these things. Very much the machoistic kind of viewpoint that I'm very against. But it was so normalized in his family that he only sought treatment for a short time, until we ended up parting ways. And I don't know if he's in therapy anymore. I haven't talked to that man in many, many years, but I hope that with everything that he has been through, that he is healing, and I hope that he's able to move past everything that he has dealt with in his life. Um, and I wish him all the healing in the world because I mean I know that we've all been through a lot, but his story really broke me, and it really still hurts me to think about it. So yeah. So with CPTSD, a lot of us are conditioned to think that what happened to us really wasn't that bad because our parents or our teachers or siblings or cousins or whoever made us believe that the mistreatment that they were putting us through wasn't that bad. And it's that same kind of belief of, oh, like this younger generation is like oversensitive. And like I said earlier, I just love the fact that the adults in this generation now who are having kids now are like, no, I'm not going to put my kid through the same thing that I went through as a kid just because back in your day it was fine for your dad to do this to you or whatever it may be, or your mom to do this to you or your siblings or whatever it may be. And that's what I mean is you can either choose to use your trauma as reasons to harm others, or you can heal it and not have other people go through the same things that you've gone through and break the cycles. And a video that I saw was of a woman talking about like how everyone has glasses in terms of their life perspective, and that she didn't understand how anyone could believe that somebody who has a broken pair of glasses because of the trauma that they've been through could see the world in the same way that somebody who had a perfectly nice pair of glasses their entire life. Like, how could you even compare those two people? Yeah, they're going to have different perspectives on life because they've been through different things. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, right? Again, I'm saying we're all on our own path, but we all have our own stories as well. I'm going to I tried to find that video earlier and I could not. But yeah, so you might not necessarily have PTSD, but you might have CPTSD. If you struggle with being able to regulate your emotions, or being called like oversensitive or whatever it may be, then and you went through a lot as a child, or if you went through a lot of long-term trauma, there is a high chance that you could have CPTSD versus PTSD. And what I hate is that a lot of us are so conditioned and normalized to think that if we aren't able to regulate our emotions or stay in healthy relationships or yada, 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 that, like we are immature, even though we have gone through something that was extremely detrimental to the way that our brain developed and the way that we view the world. So, if you have either of these disabilities, I am sorry for the things that you have been through. I understand. I have been through a lot as well. And I hope that you are able to take that pain that you have endured and use it as ammo for you to be able to heal and gain your power back and grow and get stronger, and not let people treat you the same way that you were treated in the past. And that you are able to build a relationship with yourself so that way those things don't happen again because you don't allow them to. And I'm not saying that somebody who got traumatized as a child allowed themselves to. What I'm saying is that at that time, whenever those things happened, it could have just been that nobody was around to protect you. And that hits. I know that happened for me, was that I just really didn't have a lot of people around to protect me. And so, yeah, it's building that relationship with your inner family system so that you can protect your inner self and integrate. So, yeah, okay, so before we start moving into the last segment of the episode, and where I'm going to be covering all coping mechanisms and things that you can do, or show to others to do who have suffered with trauma. I want to take a few deep breaths. So, it's okay to breathe. Slow down for a second, okay? All right, now let's move into the very last segment, okay? Okay, so first things first, I wanted to say that I am so proud of you for being able to make it here today, and making it as far as you have, even with everything that you've gone through. And I don't know your story, but it doesn't really matter because I am proud of who you have grown into and not the story that other people have written for you. So, now I'm going to be going over some coping mechanisms, some coping strategies. And I ended up texting my best friend, Jenny. Love Jenny. Hey, Jenny. She's probably listening. And so I have her text of what she would recommend to somebody who is going through, learning that they have CPTSD or PTSD. She said, I guess overall it's situational depending on the issues that they're having. They need to be able to take a deep dive into their lives and create a whole new world, but with feeling safe to do so, which involves regulating the nervous system, having healthy relationships around them because we can't heal alone, and taking time to get to know themselves again without attaching their life to their trauma, like developing new coping skills, making better decisions with people around them, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable for a little bit. Of course, cognitive processing therapy during somatic healing as well is great, by the way. But yeah, finding out what their triggers are, like why they feel that they need to get help, and then what feelings are their coping strategies, regardless if those coping strategies are negative or positive, and then helping them to replicate them with better strategies, if needed, to provide those same coping feelings. Also, finding them groups specifically tailored to their PTSD slash CPTSD can be really helpful. And then having a balance between healing as well. Um, Empathizing any relationships here too, because you can get stuck in that victim mentality and making sure that you're helping them to build a healthy environment. And then she was also recommending that, say that you were a victim of DV or anything along those lines, then you can help them find a shelter, or they might even find solace in the fact of like donating time or money to people who have gone through the similar things. So I think that she gave great advice. So I wanted to put that here, and then I also wanted to go over the coping mechanisms that I have written down as well. So first things first is breath work, such as box breaths. And I explained this last season as well. So breathing in for 5 seconds, holding it for 5 seconds, breathing out for 5 seconds, 5 times, or whatever works for you. And I also recommend doing grounding techniques whenever you feel triggered. So you can find 5 things that are green, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can feel, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And I definitely had to do that the other day because I was going through it. Another good thing that you can do whenever you are in the moment of being triggered is you can excuse yourself from the space, and you can go and write down what you are feeling in that moment so that you can come back to it later, whenever you're trying to do shadow work and journaling on it. And I know that I did a whole episode last season about shadow work, so I highly recommend it if you haven't listened to it. Um, I don't remember if I recommended this in the shadow work episode, but I do recommend keeping a dream journal because sometimes um, our subconscious holds things in our dreams that we don't even realize in our conscious waking life. And whenever you're done doing your shadow work, I recommend saying, like, I call all of my power back to me from every person, place, and thing, from every corner, rift, and edge of the universe, from every realm, void, and space. And you can also call your power back from people, because sometimes we give our power and energy to other people, consensually or unconsensually. And so it's very helpful to be able to fill your cup and call your power back so that way you can stand in your strength. Another thing to do, and I know that I touched on this last season, is meditation. You can do a very short meditation that's only 3 to 10 minutes, where you can really slow down and recenter. And if you have a space with a coloring book, or if you have a coloring book with you and can use it, coloring can be extremely soothing. And that has calmed me down from some very, very triggering events. I used to carry around my coloring book with me like all the time. So I recommend that. And whenever I learned that I had CPTSD, I found out that one of my coping mechanisms from childhood was sitting in my closet under all of my clothes, because I really enjoyed feeling like camouflaged. And so my therapist at the time ended up explaining to me that that's actually very normal for CPTSD. Is just kind of, like, um, feeling comforted and feeling safe in that space. Weighted blankets are great as well. And some things that you can do to help prevent yourself from getting more easily overwhelmed is self care. So, making sure that you're showering, eating, and resting enough, as well as doing things that make you feel good. For example, what I like to do often is I like to take myself out on like little lunch dates, or I'll go get like a nice iced coffee and I'll crochet. And I'll just like take time for me. And another good thing is transcendental meditation. So I can't remember if I covered this in the last season, but I believe that I did, in the meditation episode. So transcendental meditation is an extremely deep state of meditation where your body falls asleep, but your mind stays awake. So your brain is basically healing itself from that trauma in that meantime. And I did a presentation on this years ago at a symposium at my school, because I wanted to push for transcendental meditation to be integrated into the prison systems because it is a good form of rehabilitation. Meditation medications are also very great. I personally microdose psilocybin, but for a long time I was on different medications, um, from like psychopharmacology, and that was a journey for myself. So I also researched microdosing years before or not years, but like a long time before I did it. So I would just, maybe talk to your therapist now about getting on something, with them that can be regulated and watched over for a while, versus just jumping into psilocybin or microdosing things, because you never know how your body's going to react to it. And I would hate for somebody to jump onto that and then, it end really badly. And this is a side note. If you take antidepressants and you end up like really hyper, or you can't sleep, or you feel like you're playing baseball and you're trying to hit 10 different baseballs all at once and you're doing it, that could be a red flag because you might be manic. And with bipolar disorder, you don't want to take antidepressants, you want to take mood stabilizers. Okay. So keep that in mind. Another good thing that you can do, is spreading your hips in the morning. So, like in frog pose, and different stretches that you can do in your hips, because we hold a lot of trauma in our hips. So, doing those yoga poses can be really helpful. And the last thing that I wanted to discuss is, how to calm down your nervous system. So, the main thing that you want to do is stimulate your vagus nerve, because you want to take your body out of fight or flight. So if you've been in survival mode for years, do not be surprised if it takes your body a little bit to calm down and realize that you're not in danger anymore. And the more often that you do it, the easier it's going to get. So some great, exercises to calm down your nervous system, and personally I need to do this more, is humming and singing. The humming, vibrations can really be helpful, for your nervous system, for your vagus nerve. And you can look up a whole slew of different exercises, such as like pressing. It's hard to do it because I have a mic in my hand, but you can press the sides of your thumb 20 times and then gently pinch the, nail and the back of your thumb at the top, for 20 seconds. And the way that you know that it's working is if you're yawning, because that's your body calming down. It's coming out of fight mode. Other great ones that I use are like pulling your earlobe down, maybe putting your head to the side and just like breathing, doing that for like 15 to 30 seconds, waiting for yourself to yawn. You can like stroke your neck. You can pat your chest, or you can just, breathe with your hand on your chest. And then there's other like, tapping and stuff that you can do as well. That's something that I want to research more. And I'm going to put up videos of great ways to be able to calm down your nervous system. But just remember that like you're kind of moving that energy throughout your body whenever you're doing this. And I'd highly recommend to do it at least 2 to 3 times a day, at least whenever you wake up and before you go to sleep, because they're super easy to do and they don't take a long time. They're really helpful whenever you're in a stressful situation. And just, anytime that you remember it, just do it. The more often you do it, the easier it's going to get. Sometimes I do it and I have to remember, like if I'm in a stressful situation, I'll do it, but I have to remember that I have to like breathe during it. So definitely some good ideas there with the CNS healing, somatic exercises. And again, I'm going to release some videos on it, not from me, but from other people. And so as we close out, I wanted to say a few things that I am grateful for. One is that I work at an awesome job and I'm super, super thankful. I work in nature and I absolutely love it. And from that job, I have met a super awesome coworker who hand bundled sage that she went out and foraged, which was so freaking cool. And it was exactly what I needed. And it made me so happy. And she also made me a sun catcher, if I can get it out of this bag with one hand. And I need to get a hook so that way I can hang it up. But she ended up making me a sun catcher, and it makes me so happy because I love sun catchers, and I just love gifts. So that was awesome. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the people who are kind to me with my job and just in general. Oh, and the other day I ended up driving by this neighbor that I had, and I don't know what it was. I think I was just feeling like extra lovey that day, but I ended up yelling out the car. I was like, I hope you have a beautiful day. And she was like, thanks. And I was thinking about her a couple days ago. I was like, I wonder how she's doing. I wonder if she like appreciated that or if I like, maybe I like freaked her out. And then I ended up bumping into her in the elevator. And I was like, hey, you're that girl that I like yelled, I hope you have a beautiful day. She's like, oh my God, yeah, like it just made me so happy. Like I was like grinning from ear to ear for the rest of the day. So I loved that. That made me very happy. Um, and I always say, like, if you have a compliment about someone, just say it. There's no reason why you shouldn't. Just say it. That might be what they needed to hear that day. I also got a new hat, which is over there, and I'm not going to go grab it, but it's really cute. And the music that I've been sipping on this week is Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield and Godspeed by Paravi, Paravi. And I'm going to make sure to put that on the Spotify playlist as well. Don't forget that, there are socials. It's all listed in the description of the podcast, but I'm on socials. I'm on Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, on YouTube as well now these days. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. Sorry for such a heavy episode, but I hope you have a beautiful time and a beautiful week, and stay warm. I know here in Colorado, we're getting a lot of snow. So thanks for tuning in.